So today, on the table, we have iPhone 12 charging port replacement. I will mention this before bringing out all the tools. Make sure that you don't. Let me rephrase that. Make sure your port isn't just dirty. I'll show a before and after of a phone that that I use for reference when showing to customers. But your charging port should be, if it's, let's just say it's sticking out a little bit and you can see a little bit of the silver, try cleaning it out first. I usually don't advise this, but I'll just say this. So contrary to popular belief, your lightning pin is reversible, which is why there's pins on both sides. But in the actual port itself, the pins are only on the bottom side, which is why if you've ever had to prop it up at an angle, you're propping it up downward, not upward, or typically downward, not upward. So make sure that, and typically, at least in my experience, if let's just say this is your charging port, it's common for the dirt to be most difficult to remove in the corners, not the flats. So if you've picked some lint out, make sure to focus on the corners. Once you've ruled that out and you actually know that you need a charging port, well, here we are. This is what this video is for. So sorry for rambling on. I have a tendency to do that, but in no particular order, some of the tools that we're going to need are a pentalobe, a Phillips, a Y000. I get mine. I mention this pretty much every video. I got mine from iFixit. They are the best, allegedly the best. When the Tri-Wings came out, I was stripping screws more often than I like to admit, and then somebody pointed me in the direction of iFixit. They're great. Get them. They're amazing. At least 2 tweezers, a nylon spudger, and then there are some, not necessary, but I would highly suggest it, a magnetic mat for screw placement. If you don't have this, you can use use packing tape, so you can place your screws on. And it's nice because if, let's just say you're doing this on the kitchen table, you can pick this up, and let's just say if it's dinner time, you can, move it somewhere else without the screws, moving all over the place, and you can keep them in order, which is highly important, especially in a repair like this. It is rather complex. The battery has to come out, the board has to come out just to get to the charging port. Apple is making this more difficult than it needs to be, but, well, that's the world we live in. Next, isopropyl rubbing alcohol for the battery. Avoid 70%. Only use 91 or 99%. It helps for removing the battery adhesive strips, which also on that note, if you're ordering a charging port, you might as well I would order at least 2, because if you don't, they're not very expensive. They're no more than maybe $1. For re-adhering the battery inside of the frame. They make them specific to each model, so they will, so it fits around the wireless charger. What else? You can also get a perimeter gasket for the screen. What else? Heat for heating up the charging port flex. Also, there's a couple of other adhesives that are inside of the device. You can also use a hairdryer. Yeah, and that's about it. So, with that said, let's get started. So, after you remove the pentalobe, we grab our opening tool. Now I'm going to come clean. I've already taken this phone apart, and by accident I've removed, and not by accident, I intentionally did it, not having any foresight that I was going to make another video about the charging port, but it is what it is. I've already removed the perimeter adhesive, so there's no way that I can reenact that accurately. I have marked the brackets where the most amount of effort is going to be, which is right where these black lines are, but ultimately what holds, for though if you've never taken apart an iPhone, what ultimately holds the screen to the housing are these clips, the screen clips into these brackets on the inside of the housing, which are here, 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 and here. The first hurdle is going to be getting the screen off, which really the only way around doing that, at least in my experience, it depends on how old your phone is. This phone is, at least when I did it, is obviously not brand new, but new in the sense of the gasket is still new, so it has a lot of grabbing strength. So it doesn't just lift up easy, but typically the older your device is, especially if, you know, you work outside and your phone goes through a lot, typically the gasket wears out easier and it's easier to remove. If it's not, or even if it is and you want to play it safe, as most of you will be reusing the screen, I'd suggest getting either a heat gun or a hair dryer and just warming up. Usually just to get the bottom of the screen off, I will warm from about here to here. And typically I will start in, you know, not exactly by the corner, but I will start about right here. And you sort of just want to pry open, and then you get to about right here. By that time, your screen might have already cooled down. Same thing, warm it up. I mean, you don't want to just blast the thing with heat for 5 minutes because you can damage the screen. Once again, if you're going to reuse it, go be careful. But the typical gauge is you should be able to touch it, but for maybe no more than about 2 seconds before it getting warm. Any hotter than that, you're bound to damage the screen. Once you get past a corner, usually the method that I have is there's two methods. One is just to run the opening tool along the side. The second, which I feel this you can accidentally gouge components if you just use too much force. A much more controlled effort is to twist, and it allows, as you can see, the screen lifts up without you exerting too much force or damaging the screen. Like I said, your first hurdle is here and then here. After you get to the top, and you don't want to lift up more than about here. Keep in mind your flex, the OLED display, touch and display flex are right here. So especially be careful of that. The other one is up here. You shouldn't be opening the screen more than about that anymore, and you're liable to rip all those cables off completely. Once again, if your screen has cooled down, warm up here and here, and you can literally just wiggle it off. Obviously mine is coming off much easier because I don't have adhesive, but then you're going to get to here, these two brackets here. Usually what I do is I literally just keep rocking it back and forth, and then sometimes I will use my opening tool to lift up. We're then going to get here. Now I'm going to come clean, and I'm going to say that I have not actually done a charging port on an iPhone 12. I've done hundreds of other charging ports across pretty much all models. I've done a couple of, there's a customer of mine that does custom iPhones, like gold-plated iPhones, and I recently did a video where I basically transferred all the components from a 12 Pro Max into basically an aftermarket gold-plated housing. So at least from my understanding, so I have a little bit of experience with the 12s that way, so I'm just going to essentially, and they typically from model to model aren't that different. Sorry, once again, sorry for rambling on and on and on, but at least in the 12 series, they'll have a 5G antenna. The annoying thing is, especially in the newer models, typically a charging port is board out. So I'm going to remove the board, and if it's ultimately not necessary, I'm probably just going to edit this portion out, or portions of it out, but I'm going to proceed as if it is a board out. There are a couple of things that I'd suggest, mainly just some plastic bags for your Face ID and rear camera. But on to the next. Remove or disconnect the battery. Nylon spudger. Take our screen, set it aside. Especially in a repair this complex, the magnetic mats are crucial. If you don't have a magnetic mat, or you don't want to, I don't know, you're on a time crunch, I'd suggest using masking tape of some sort. You can take a strip of it, and then if you need to pick it up and move your screws, like let's just say you're doing this on the dining room table, it's easy to move them around, and it won't get blown over from a gust of wind. This phone is a little bit water damaged. I mean, I'm essentially just doing this as a placeholder, as a prop, just so we can do this video. I'm not actually going to be replacing the port. I'm just going to be taking it apart and putting it all back together, but just so you have a visual representation. If you're not experienced, I would highly suggest not using metal on the board, as the chances of damaging the board go up dramatically. So we just want to take our camera, this thing is a bit water damaged, but once again, it's just a placeholder. Now, as it is a placeholder, I'm not going to be doing anything with my camera, but if you're not doing this in one sitting, I would highly suggest getting a baggie, putting this in. That way you don't accidentally get dust or debris on the camera. Now it's a matter of pretty much going through and disconnecting all of these flex cables. Now you technically don't have to remove the Face ID module, but it's just one less thing. Of course, there is a bit of adhesive, which is right here. So make sure not to, I mean, pretty much the rule of thumb is whenever you have any sort of resistance, be as gentle as you can, because Apple is notorious for putting adhesive on top of, you know, other flexes, and if you just pull, you can tear one or the other or both, and some of them are easily replaceable, some of them are not. You know, for instance, Face ID components aren't really repairable or replaceable in the sense that that flex is paired to the board. So obviously you want to be as minimally invasive as possible. Lift up on your charging flex. go against my own rule. Be very gentle. There we go. Yeah, this is unfortunately a board out. So they have one cable, one flex here, and then the other runs underneath the board and comes out here. This would be far easier if we didn't have to do this. They started doing it with the 7s. You used to, if you were experienced enough, you used to be able to just do a charging port replacement without even taking the screen off. But now you have to take out the battery. Actually, there's a possibility you might not have to take out the battery, but I'm inclined to say that you probably do. So on that note, I'm going to start with removing all the components from It'd be really nice if they didn't, if they just made everything in one. But for whatever reason, that would just be too easy. So there is a little piece on the inside of this. You essentially just have to wiggle it, and the grand scheme of things, it's a piece of metal. If need be, you can if you somehow, I don't know, rip it off, and it's just this thing right here. Hold on, I need a white background, so it's this thing right here. You can bend it back into place, but at least the trick for me was tilting it at a downward angle, because obviously you want to move this bracket here out. So I guess that worked. a bunch of either sand or salt in this, which is why I keep tapping in. You probably, hopefully, won't have to. Now, at this point, this is where our rubbing alcohol is going to come into play. We have our battery adhesive strips. The bottom two are going to be the longest. The technique that I have is, first and foremost, whenever you're removing the battery in pretty much any model, you always want to remove at least all the newer ones. And when I say newer, I mean like more like iPhone 6, which obviously iPhone 6 isn't very new. But you want to remove as many components in the way. That way you can pull out as almost 180-degree angle as possible. You want to avoid pulling out at a steep angle like this. I mean, it needs to be as close to straight as possible. It lowers the chances of tearing considerably, and that's also what the alcohol is for. It almost serves like a lubricant. If I didn't already mention this, avoid using 70%. Stick to 91 or 99. I use 99, but most of you are going to be able to, unless outside of ordering it specifically on like Amazon or eBay or something, you can find 91 in the a CVS or your grocery store. If you must use 70, use it as sparingly as possible. So I try to sort of wrap it around. Like you can see right here. Sometimes it's still too slippery. Then I'll put another couple of drops. The other technique that I have is good Lord. Wiggling back and forth or pulling at an angle. So this one is going to be the largest. As you can see, it stretches. I'll try to keep this in one piece as possible. Pretty much all the way up here. It wraps around the wireless charger. Just for context, the one here is a lot smaller. Yeah, and these are going to be a slight problem. The other thing which I feel like I'm inevitably just going to end up doing lovely. The other one is you can just apply a few drops, and then usually, at least on the 12 Pro Max that I have worked on, the strip is so small, as you can see right here. It literally only goes right here and right here. You apply a couple of drops. I applied a little bit too much there and it ran down, but that's one of the reasons that you use 91 or 99, as it pretty much can't damage the phone. I mean, the irony of water damage treatment is sometimes you'll dunk the entire board in rubbing alcohol. It's ultimately not water that kills a phone, it's the corrosion afterwards. rubbing alcohol doesn't corrode. So now that we have our board, set it aside. Now we can proceed with removing the board. So this flex right here is going to be difficult to get to. And we can finally remove that. And what am I not doing right? All right, they got me. One more. Fold that 90 degrees that way. Pull it out. So this is lovely. So this one is corroded shut. Luckily it wasn't that bad. Unclip. I believe this is the 5G antenna. This little thing right here. Now, you can set that aside. Now, there is just adhesive holding these together. Good Lord, they're making this unnecessarily difficult. So, if I was you, I would be using some heat right now. Luckily, the adhesive isn't overly, it's not too strong. I just don't know why they need so much of it. I'm trying to do this with a camera above my head, which is Okay, there we go. So we can see the majority of it is here and right here at the intersection. See, once again, you can see it's here and here. Once we're here, yeah, there are no more screws. We can take our board, set it aside. If you're not, once again, if you're not doing this in one sitting, it's not a bad idea to put the board or the cameras in a plastic baggie of some sort. So it would appear that the adhesive starts from about, at least I can feel it start. You can see where my spudger stops, which is about right at this line. So from about this line and further, my guess is that there is adhesive all along here. It's typically not overly powerful. You just need to heat it up just a little bit. So from about the sim tray this pattern right here. Yeah, minimal effort. And sometimes there's adhesive along the sides. There's usually a little bit holding down the lower mic. And then there's some in this corner right there. You can see me wiggling my... Actually, I don't know if you can, but it's a little bit right there. Once we're here, fold it literally just up and out. And there's still going to be some, there's a little foam ring, flat side of your spudger, and sort of same technique to open the screen. Rather than pushing or cutting, you can just pry out. At this point, it's not a bad idea to, number one, for the reinstall, like I said, I don't have another one of these. I'm just, going through the motions. You don't have to worry about the adhesive so much, but you should make sure there isn't any adhesive bunched up on the lower microphone, or else you're going to put the entire phone back together just to find out that your lower microphone doesn't work. After that, usually the new charging ports have they typically have these plastic pieces so that you would peel off to reveal the adhesive. So you'll probably find them here, 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 and most importantly is if you find them over this microphone or this microphone, make sure that you peel them off. I mean, essentially they're there to make sure that the microphone doesn't get dust or water or debris or whatever just in transit. I don't know why it would. They're typically in packaging, but like I said, you want to make sure that they're not covered up by, this is a mistake I've done enough times, which is why I'm telling you. So make sure you take the plastic off of your microphones, or else those won't work. And at this point, it's just a matter of putting all of this stuff back together. If you have good screw placement, If you have good screw placement, then this is going to be a lot easier. I'll usually start out with the, I guess you sort of have to, because if you put in the standoff screws first, then you can't get to these. Now this, obviously this cable is OEM, I just pulled it right out, so all of the cables are, you know, essentially tucked and folded in just right. But something you want to make sure of is that it aligns properly and that it fits in, and you hear that telltale snap. It shouldn't fit in at an angle this way, or, you know, left, right, up, or down. It should be 90 degrees each way. Once you've confirmed that, we can proceed the last one is right here. Don't forget some of the screws along the side. Switch to our tri-wing. So that's what I thought. But it goes on the right. This one right here to the left is reserved for that little loop. Next goes the tri-wing. I'd like to connect the flex first. Honestly, I can't remember whether or not. Yeah. They do things in layers. Like I said, I'm still learning this phone. This is the first time I've ever truly taken apart a 12. And our Phillips for the tri-wing goes here. Make sure your Taptic engine doesn't move, as I mean, literally its only job is just vibrating back, you know, back and forth. I guess not back and forth, vibrating, no, just vibrating in place. They do have a tendency to I mean, I've even seen this in phones that have never been taken apart, but the screws will unthread themselves. So you want to make sure, at the bare minimum, that the Taptic engine is good and tight. Usually I will So next we come in with our board. Now remember, this annoyingly tucks in right here. So let me zoom in here really quick. But remember, the antenna right here is on the outside. This sneaks in the middle. But we're gonna make sure to fold back all of our flexes. Now, we have a tendency to forget about this little guy down here. So make sure to not crush. Now, I like to connect this before you connect all of your, before you tighten down the board, as if this flex is positioned too high or too low, even just by a fraction of a millimeter, getting this, it's much harder to get this one in than it is this one if it's mispositioned. So before we tighten this, and I'm saying this also in reference to pretty much all the other models. So there's our Phillips there. If you want to, you can start connecting there, slot this in. So it does have to fold over. There we go. And fold this into place. Now this, at least both of these came out. And here we go. There's MagSafe for you. So we have this little piece right here. So the cylindrical, or I guess semi-cylindrical piece is on the inside. And notice that it has to line up here. And it keeps wanting to adhere to the MagSafe magnets. Once that's in, we can add our bracket. Now, out of habit, especially on longer brackets, if you, let me say it like this, I wait until all the screws are in before tightening, as if you tighten the first, and sometimes you have to loosen it in order to get the next couple of screws in, so it's usually easiest just to get it in place, then do one or the other That way you're not having to redo any of your work. So we can connect this flex. I don't know what I'm having a hard time for. There we go. Then we can fold down our whatever adhesive. Next, we can grab our, here we go, connect that flex. If I remember correctly, this one is a tri-wing. There we go. There we go. If you get this out of place, I believe it has a forcing function. Like one is taller than the other, but you'll see this little piece right here is on the left side. Can drop our sim tray back in, add our retaining bracket. The last Phillips for the board. Now, at this point, I guess we technically didn't need to remove the camera. I did just for simplicity, just because it is easier to get the board in and out when you have less flexes in the way. Everything is very compact, and if you, I have done this where, you know, like a good example is the charging port, the lower one down here. If, let's just say you get it in place and then you press down, you can damage the flex in the process of doing that. So usually just getting the flexes out of the way is, in my opinion, the best course of action. You do want the why is this so blurry? You do want the top of this metal bracket to be sitting just below where the bezel sits. If it's sitting above, I mean, essentially there's a slot right within this little black piece right here. If you don't get it right, then if it's sitting above there, then one of a couple of things. You either won't connect, you won't be able to seat the screen properly. The other is that you can damage the screen. I did this, let's just say, enough times on the iPhone 11, I'm sorry, XR, and a couple of times on the 11 before, mainly on the XR, but I learned on the XR where the camera would have a tendency to come out of place. It would sit a little bit higher. I'd think it was in place, and then I would press down thinking that it wasn't seated properly, and then I would crack the display in the process, or I'd crack the LCD. So don't do that. These screens are very expensive. I mean, at the time of writing, I think Mobile Centrics has these for just over $300. I mean, just for context, once again, as of this writing, Apple charges for this repair $280, I believe. Tell me if I'm wrong. Comment below. But as a general rule of thumb, Apple's not a huge fan of working on devices that have been taken apart. And obviously the whole point of these DIY videos is for you to do it yourself. Now, I don't have any of these. Once again, this is a prop. This is for an iPhone 8. But you can, there are adhesives that you can get that are cut specifically. So in this case, it would be here, 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 and here. They do make them, but I am not going to bother with that. I'm going to make another video for some of the other components in this, so I'm not going to bother with the adhesive at all. But you can use double-sided tape. So I get mine from Tessa, but I mean, pretty much any double-sided tape works. You don't want it to be too strong. Don't use glue, because if you need to take this phone apart again, obviously you need to be able to get into it. So, word of the wise. All right. Once again, I mentioned this at the beginning. Or if I didn't, I'm mentioning it now. First and last thing that you are connecting is the battery. Just because the device is turned off, as long as the battery is connected to the board, there's still juice running through the board. There's still electricity running through the board. So the last thing that we're connecting is the battery. And it turns on. So here we are. This is an iCloud locked phone, so I really can't get past this. But obviously I can see that my screen works. And the phone charges. So as far as I'm concerned, mission accomplished. Well, I won't go through the hypotheticals, and I won't even bother with these because, I mean, these are easy. When you're reseating your screen, make sure to get these brackets. Once again, make sure your front-facing camera assembly sits just below that bezel line. Usually, a clear indicator if it's sitting properly is this should be flush. As you can see, my screen is not sitting up. Make sure there are also no screws that are a couple of things. They have a tendency to stick on the Taptic engine, or they'll adhere to the Taptic engine, or something like that can crack your display. Don't do that. Also make sure they don't adhere to the frame adhesive. Obviously I took mine out, so they're not, nothing to adhere to, but I've also damaged screens that way. Close, put in your pentalobe. Job well done. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching till the end. If you have any questions, I usually respond in a timely fashion. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.